Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest this week. It's going to be the turn of the musician, artist, and also former TV editor and producer. It's the one and only Anja Huwe, one-time member of Xmal Deutschland, who, after decades of creative work and amazing projects, has got a new solo album that came out 2024 titled Codes. That has a collaboration with various people, including Mona Mur. So this is the interview with Anja. So after several minutes of interesting and slightly casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Anja, over to you.
Well, my very first concert was Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, yeah. For some reason, someone took me there. I mean, I was a kid, basically, and that was really impressive because I never saw something like that before. And but I was very young then. But my real sort of getting into music was more Patti Smith in the beginning and all these kind of music, like also kind of a glamish sort of stuff, but not really. I was very much my very first and serious getting into music was punk. Really.
Right. There you go.
Started with like Patti Smith and this New York scene, but then more or less the British scene. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And did you have any, I mean, often find at these moments in life, you know, older brothers and sisters can play influence. Did you have anybody that also had any sort of influence, or even your parents? Did they have any musical, excitement or cultural?
Yeah, my grandmother was a singer and poet, and but more classic music, of course, right? And my father also wanted to go into music, but then, of course, they had the war, and things changed, and so my father became a journalist. But my grandmother was singing, and so it was always part of my life, really. But then again, you know, when parents or grandparents tell you something about music, that's not too interesting for you because it's like old-fashioned or something. So the beginning was really more or less the British scene when it all started, like 76, 77. So that's when I dove into music, really.
Right, my God. And whereabouts did you grow up? What city was it that you were coming or living in at that time?
I used to live in Hamburg. I still do these days. So that was always my, you know, my surrounding, my background. But very soon I started traveling, like to London, took the boat to Harwich,
Right.
to Berlin. You know, those were the places that I liked. I was in New York when I was very young. So I went to the CBGB and all these clubs, but I was too young for that. You know, I always thought I will never get in, but of course I got in. I was a girl. So I saw all these people there. You know, the scene like Blondie and stuff. Without really being part of the scene or something.
Yes, and Hamburg is famous for many things, but one being on a cultural level, the Beatles, who did that residency there. Was there any sort of interest and excitement about the 60s scene of the Beatles and Stones and Jimi Hendrix and people like that?
No, it wasn't my scene. I was too young for that.
Yes.
So I was not really into that. So that was, to me, pretty boring, really. No, it was not really my scene.
No, well, absolutely. And then sort of in this country, obviously we had that sort of that scene with, it was almost like pub punk, wasn't it? There was people like Doctors of Strangeness and Dr. Feelgood and bands like that. And then slowly the Damned appeared and then the Sex Pistols. Were you conscious of that all happening at that sort of time, or was it a few years later that you became kind of aware of it and interested?
No, I was interested in it. I mean, my story is really, when I left school, I here and there had photo shootings because I was like a young, blonde, good-looking girl, and I got the offer to move to Paris to work as a model, which was not really what I wanted, but it was at least, you know, a chance to leave home and do something very exciting. But at the same time, I discovered punk music here in Hamburg. I mean, we had a few clubs here, just a few. I mean, there were not too many punks around, but I found that really, really exciting. And I did some research, and I found out that all happens like in London and the north of England. And so I said to my, at that time, boyfriend, why don't we go to London for New Year's Eve? You have a car, and so let's get a hotel there and just check it out. And so we went over there, went to the King's Road, and I asked some of those people, like with colored hair, so where to go to? And they said, oh, there's a few clubs and concerts, go here and there. So at some point, we went down the streets on the Strand, and there was the Lyceum. And lots and lots of people in front, punks and stuff. And it was really packed. I went to the door. There was a announcer saying, no, it's sold out here. So I said, but I'm from Germany. I want to get in. And my boyfriend is here. And he said, okay, let's get in. So we went in. And what happened was the Clash played there, and the Slits supported them. And that was my very first punk rock concert, which I enjoyed very much. It was so exciting. And the bizarre thing is, when they closed the Lyceum years later, we were the last to play there.
Blimey.
Which was so exciting. Yeah, it was very exciting.
Yes. And then, you know, in this country, most people, especially in the sort of, I don't know, the 70s, would leave school at sort of 16 with a couple of O levels. Some people went and did a degree, you know, got, you know, A levels and then did a degree. When you got to 16, did you stay on to college and university, or did you have a kind of a life change at that stage?
When I was 16, I discovered things, and I still went to school, and I left school, I think, was 17 or something. I didn't know what to do, to either, you know, work or go to university or go back to school. And I decided to go back to school at some point. I very, very soon went into photography, not being in front of a camera, but being in the back of a camera. And so I did that for 2 or 3 years. And when I was about 20, I think, I went back to school because I decided to study art. So that's what I did for a year. And then I went to the university. But at the same time, we started the band, and I had to make a decision, either study or see the world. So I decided to go into music.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed doing this show is that, because when I started, you know, I don't know if you came across the famous NME's cassette C86.
But there was on them.
Yes. Well, there was a lot of bands, and I was an indie kid, so it was great fun for me at the time. But in this country, there was a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say quite go as far as poverty, but, you know, economically things weren't looking good. We'd had sort of like Thatcher came in for the next 10 years. There was a huge amount of unemployment, and there was a lot of social security that people could claim. And I think part of why there's so many bands that started in the 80s was when you got 16, 17, the future didn't look that brilliant. And it was like, what do? You kind of claim some unemployment benefit, get your housing benefits sort of, you know, paid for, and then just, you know, doss around. And so a lot of people obviously formed bands. And at that stage, you know, we had things like the John Peel Show, we had 3 weekly music papers. So it kind of helped create this kind of creative energy in the country and creative chapter. So there was an awful lot of kind of music and bands and scenes that started to develop. What was it like with you in Hamburg? Was there much, I don't know, opportunity, or did you feel like there wasn't a huge amount to look forward to in life? So let's do rock and roll instead.
Well, there is a huge difference because like in Germany, the boys had to go to the army. had to join the army. Everyone, like with the age of 18 for almost 2 years. And in Britain, you didn't have that. So everyone started earlier in Britain, like with the age of like 16, as you said. In Germany, it was completely different. And the whole system of, education was completely different. And third, Germany was at those days a very rich country. So we didn't have that. There was no reason to work. There was no reason to do anything. Everyone went to university for free, go to school, let it go and do whatever they wanted. They were just, the boys had to go to the army. That's why a lot of boys left West Germany and went to Berlin, because in Berlin you were free. And so to make this short, the Brits started much earlier when they left school, and we did it all a bit later because, for these reasons. Huh?
Yes, absolutely. I know. Yes, I just sort of remember a friend's brother went to Berlin with a group of them and explained a bit of that sort of political or sort of, structure that
they
you
also
had.
they got different passports too. Whereas as soon as you moved to Berlin, you got a Berlin passport, so you were kind of free. When you went back to the West, you were not. You did not get arrested. Normally, you would get arrested if you say we're not going to the army. So that was a huge difference. Everyone. We started later.
Yes. You did so, and at that stage we'd sort of entered that slightly post-punk period, and musically things were changing. Obviously, quite a few of the punk bands had their day, and punk had sort of become a bit of a cliche. What was your musical taste as it was creeping into the 80s? What were you starting to listen to or become inspired by at this stage?
I started listening to the Sex Pistols. Which I didn't find very interesting. I liked the look, but the music to me was like rock and roll. But then I discovered The Clash. I discovered The Cure. I saw all these bands, playing here. Also Basement 5, Psychedelic Furs was big for me. I loved them. Like all these bands, like The Damned, and all these bands were like constantly on my cassette player, really. And I put these mixtapes together like everyone else did at those days. That was more or less the music that I listened to.
Yes, God, we loved our mixtapes, didn't we? Spent days putting those together just to try and impress your new girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. It was
of course, love letters, huh?
With a lot of meaning in there. Those songs, they were so carefully chosen.
Sometimes I really think someone should do like a show with these mixtapes, and ask people like me, so what is your favorite mixtape, and then put it on digital or digitalize it and then do a show with it.
Yes, absolutely.
Really
there is one of those Led Zeppelin songs that people used to do, which is I can't remember, but people would do it because it was a bit of a heartfelt, emotional song, and almost a ballad that showed that you might want to rock and roll, but at the same time you were a sensitive guy who still wanted a proper relationship. I can't remember what it was called. I don't know if it was called. I don't know. It was one of those ones. I remember a few men who loved. I don't know, Led Zeppelin. So look, so the band, it begins in the very early 80s at this stage. Did you have a sort of an idea of the sound, the look, where you were going to be going in the next few years with it?
Well, no, not really. You do things like out of the belly, really, don't you? Coming back to the story, Paris or not, my decision was very clear when I came back from London from this amazing Clash and Slits concert. I decided to cut my hair off, from very long blonde hair to very short hair. And I still lived at home at those days at my parents' house. And when I came in, my mom opened the door and closed the door, and I heard her screaming because, it was a total change, I looked like a little boy, but I was free, I was free. So I really liked it, and that was it with Paris. Paris was like a goodbye, Paris. And I decided to go into art and music, and I thought, I have so many friends out there who play in bands and who have rehearsal rooms. Why not to do the same? And well, I started doing my own fashion then at those days, you know, painting these shirts and crazy color my hair and stuff. And that was the beginning of, let's say, a new home, because at some point I had to move out. I mean, come on. I mean, where I lived in the suburbs, everyone knew me. So I moved into the red light district to St. Pauli, and that was fantastic. You know, I was completely free.
Yes, God, that must have been
Not controlled, say not controlled.
Yes, absolutely. It's quite something when you don't have to explain to your parents what time you're going to get in at, or what time you're going to eat, because parents always want to eat about 5:30, don't they? And you know,
True.
and even sleeping on a mattress on the floor felt very rebellious when you're a certain age.
Yeah, well, you know, I had lots of posters on in my room, and like punk rockers and Patti Smith and all that. And at some point, it was enough for my father. He just took them off of my walls, and that was really it. I moved out. You know, I said, no, this is you know, I am a punk rocker myself, and I want this in my room, and you are not allowed to do this. And so I moved out.
Yes. This is it was slightly easy to be rebellious back then, wasn't it? Parents, there was a definite line, wasn't there? I don't know what it would be like now. But then, yes, when you started to form the sound and the sort of going into the studio, had you played live before you went into the studio at all, or were you sort of rehearsing and then tried to make a record?
No, it was all a bit different compared to these days, really, I have to say. I mean, we couldn't play. I was the bass player in the beginning, but we decided to ask Zigzag Records, which was a good label here in Hamburg. They did lots of punk bands and avant-garde. So we went to see Alfred and asked him if we could probably record a record. And at those days, when we recorded the famous Incubus Succubus, the singer left the band. She didn't turn up, so it was my turn. I never sung before, really. I mean, not really. And so it was my turn. And from that point on, I was the singer of X Mal Deutschland. So that's how it all started. And I said, but I will never play live. And they organized a gig at an art factory, something. And well, I had to play there. We played there. We had all but 6 songs or something. And that was our first gig.
Fantastic. And did it feel exciting?
I don't know. I was more or less, it was pretty bizarre because I never saw myself on a stage, really. So I just had to do it because they organized it and I did it. So what to say, you know? That was the first one, and a few followed with a DAF. And then we very soon got the deal with VIVA, so that was a completely different story then.
Well, I know, a new chapter. And did you support the Copto twins at this stage?
Yeah, once when we recorded Fetish, at some point Ivo said, okay, you have your first gig in London. And we said, no. And he said, yes, you have your first gig in London. You will support the Cocktail Twins. And at those days, I mean, they just came down from Scotland. It was not possible to talk to them because it was not possible to understand them. I mean, you know, so, but it was fun. I remember it. So it was pretty nice. Yeah, we supported them once or twice. I can't remember. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And did you record this? This is in Blackwing Studios in London that you recorded the album Fetish. Did you have it all very demoed and very rehearsed? Were you in the studio very long for that particular recording?
I think we were in the studio for 2 weeks or something. We had almost the whole album together. We recorded it the typical way. First of all, the band, and then at the end, the singer on top. but the interesting thing was, I mean, it was always the Blackwing studio was not only the recording studio, it was also a studio for rehearsals, and all these bands that we knew rehearsed there, Yazoo and all these bands. And the funny thing is, the studio for us was booked in the daytime, and at night there was another band in the studio, and it was Depeche Mode at those days, a very young teeny band. So we were sort of more or less laughing at these guys, saying, "Oh, who are they?"
Yes.
But that's how life goes sometimes,
Yes, they won't be around for long, will they?
Mm.
Who knew? Anyway, yes, I mean it's great to have those kind of memories, really, isn't it? Was it a residential studio as well, or did you just sort of have to go down the road and keep in a hostel at this stage, or did Ivo put?
Yeah, we only recorded there, but we stayed in I don't know, it was a guest house or something like that. Yeah, it was a guest house on Maida Vale somewhere or something.
Oh, Maida Vale.
Yeah, I remember that. We had our bus, our Volkswagen band bus, parked there next door, and so we always went, to the studio and back, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
Amazing, yes. And with your creative process, I mean, it's a 5-piece band at the moment. How did you sort of bring songs together? Was there any particular way that the band operated at this stage as a kind of creative unit?
The X Mal Deutschland band?
Yes.
Well, yes. It was more or less pretty naive. I mean, someone came up with a line, and then the guitars came on top, or the other way around. And I was always the very last at those days.
Right.
Add to what I'm doing now is a huge difference, because writing songs at those days was totally bizarre. And to me, I mean, I didn't even know what a chorus and a verse was. I mean, it was just making music, being loud, and getting something together. And through working in studios over the years and with producers, I more and more got into this kind of, how do you write a song? That's pretty normal, I think.
Yes. And then John Peel picks up on the band, and you do a session that was like December 1982 is your...
We did 4 sessions, yes.
4 sessions. That must have been, I mean, having the sort of the world, having John Peel at that stage, all through his life, really, picking up on the band. Were you, was that thrilling? Was that a surprise as well?
Yeah, it was a surprise. I mean, for example, in Germany, you had this national radio and no private radio stations. The only thing is, in the South, you could hear AFN, the American radio station, and in the middle of, I mean, very close to Hamburg, you could listen to it if you had a proper radio. You could listen to BBC. They were like, at those days, based in somewhere near Bremen or something, the German ones. And so we heard about that he always played the very first single, and he was a huge fan. At some point when we were in London, he started inviting us. We never met him. I mean, hardly anyone met him, like Vance, which yes. But from his side, I do understand. But we did 4 sessions at the BBC studios. It was pretty stressful, because that was big.
Yes. And did you have, was it Dale Griffin who was he the producer for one or all of those sessions?
No, there were always different producers, but they were not nice. At those days, they were not nice with, I would say, girl bands. It was a very different situation.
To be honest, most people I've interviewed from the 80s, they had a great recording from the sessions, but they didn't enjoy it because it was very stressful. And the producer, there was one particular producer who, I don't think he was the drummer for Mott the Hoople during the 70s.
Yes, I know. We worked with this guy too. Yes, he was the worst.
So, yes, he obviously probably looked at these, young kids going, gee, but it was his day job.
It's not only, but it's not only young kids. It's more or less girls. They did not take us serious. And that was the fact, They were
Yes.
really nasty, saying, okay, you have one more go in and do it. What? They were not friendly, and they knew that they had the power to do this. These days I would say, fuck off, and I fuck off, and then goodbye. Do you do your job? I do my job. But you have to learn this, how to act and react to these machos,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
still have these people. But at those days, being in a girl band, hell.
Of course, yeah, no, absolutely, no. I just everybody who's ever done a BBC session always had a pretty horrible, especially the drummers. I think it was just always one of those experiences.
But they hit things for a living, and that's their problem. The drummers.
They do, indeed. I know. Yeah, I know. I can't remember. Lemmy used to have a very good joke about drummers. I don't know, about coming in late and stuff like that. How do you know a drummer's at the door? And because they come in late. I don't know. It was Lemmy had to sort of tell it. It loses translation in that. I'm not very good at telling jokes, as you can tell. But I know everyone's probably going to ask you this. Can you remember how Incubus came together, this particular track? Because it's obviously such a famous number. And
I don't know.
That's fair enough. These things it was over 40 years ago. I mean, so yes. So that was that. Then obviously with a lot of bands, as you can imagine, as you've been in one, what I found that most bands have this great 5-year narrative. They get together, they do that. Bizarrely, you tick all the boxes here. They do a single John Peel session, first album, things going well. They do a tour in their little camper van transit. Second album, things are going slightly better, but sort of tricky. So what was it like coming for the next album after? Because you do a quick kind of a year of promoting that and then sort of back into the studio or writing another album. What was that process like for the band at this stage?
To the second album, you mean?
Yes.
Roxanne? Oh, I don't know. I mean, the normal way. I mean, we started playing, we had a good press. We were like, everyone wanted us to join their parties, which we didn't. We started. Ivo wanted us to write more songs, which I have to say, coming again back to like Germany and Britain. In Britain, the musicians that we knew from Britain, who came from up north down to London, they lived in squats. They didn't have any money. They only had the guitars. And the only goal was either music or football. That was it. And so they started writing songs. And they had like 30 or 40 songs for an album. We didn't do that because we came from wealthy families. We had a good education. We started studying for nothing. I mean, you didn't have to pay anything for this. And we just had a good time. And he said, so where are the songs? Write songs. I want a second album. And the second album is always a very difficult album. So go ahead and write songs, which we didn't really do. We enjoyed ourselves. So we had an album and we wrote songs like going back to Hamburg to our rehearsal room. But it was a completely different situation. And the pressure was much higher because on the first album, I mean, you just write songs and you release them. You don't know what happens anyway. You could sell one record or maybe 10,000 or something. You don't know. But the second one, if you have such a good press from the first one, then you really have to deliver. And I think we did, but he didn't think we did. So that was a difference.
And you were back at, this is Livingstone Studios in London, wasn't it, actually? And what was it like? Because you had is it Mick Glossop, who was your producer? Was he quite sympathetic? Did he get the concept of the band at this stage?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. It was good to work with him. Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Yeah, amazing. And then sort of, this is your sort of the third album, which is kind of obviously sort of 87. What was the sort of mood like of the band at this stage?
Well, yes, it was okay, but of course, as you can imagine, after a few years spending every day together, 24 hours, things come up, and at those days, Phonogram, we had our own label, Exile, but Phonogram was the main label. They wanted to, as you can imagine, focus on the singer. And I wasn't really prepared for that. And so the pressure was there. Kind of, I wouldn't say jealousy. No, it's not true. But, well, it got into a strange feeling situation. And other bands came in to this A&R guy, like The Mission and All About Eve, Zodiac Mind Warp. They were all on the same sort of pool. And the competition was there, yes, which was never the case in the beginning. But if you go to like a bigger label, like we did at that day, like a major label, things change because there's the big money, and that changes things and situations.
Yes, and also that kind of what I also noticed is that that particular period there'd been the sort of the post-punk, there was goth, there was psychobilly, the indie pop world had developed, and then sort of as the 80s progressed, sort of 87, 88, the music kind of the next wave of 16, 18-year-olds came in, and yeah, there was that kind of ecstasy was there. Suddenly people wanted to have a different band to listen to or discover. I suppose discovering a band is always exciting when you're young. And so a lot of indie bands that I sort of have interviewed, often like, the Primitives, the Darling Buds, the Mighty Lemon Drops, they were thinking, actually, the fans, even our loyal fans aren't interested in our next album, are they? They were finding it hard to keep going. Did you find when you were doing your sort of the album Devils, was that... Was it a slog at all to sort of think about what to do for your fourth album?
Yeah, well, Devils was a completely different story. I mean, after Viva, we had lots and lots of discussions, and so we split up. And Phonogram gave the name to me and Wolfgang because they said, okay, she is a singer, so she should keep the name. And so we started working on more material at some point. I had a very interesting and interested publisher from Xmal Music. He brought up the idea to offer me like a special deal. So I recorded The Girl in the Iron Mask, which was like a Billy Bragg song, which is like on Strange Music or Strange Fruit or whatever the label is called. Because he suggested I should do a solo career, very much compared to Björk. He said so. They built up Björk, and they would do the same with me. So as a test, we recorded this song, but to be honest, that at those days it was just too much for me because I knew the pressure would be massive on me and only on me. So I just gave in. I recorded it, and we went back to Germany, and we started working on Devils. Yes, but at those days, I was not really convinced anymore by making music. I thought about maybe going back to art or doing something completely different. I mean, we wrote this album, we recorded the album, but we had a producer in which I did not like at all. An obnoxious guy, really horrible guy, like a rocker. He was the same. It was the same story like we were just talking about this BBC guys,
Yes.
telling you what to do. And it was my record and not his record. And so I was so angry. So for some reason, the Devil's album to me is, it will be re-released this year, right? But I'm not really behind it. because it changed so much. I mean, to the actual tracks that we wrote, they were much rougher, and I liked them much more. But he was just polishing it, and that was not the way I wanted to be presented. You know.
Yes, God, was that engineered? Was that Paul Corkett?
Yeah, he did a remix or something, but I can't really remember, and I don't want to because
No, God, let's
the
not.
whole thing was very much very difficult to handle.
Yes, my God. And then, I mean, then the band, do you have a sort of can you remember a moment that you think that's it? That's that chapter is over? Was there a sort of...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, at those days when the record was released, and I did a lot of press and blah blah blah, and this record company, I mean, we released it in Germany, and I said, but Germany is not our market. Our market is out there, Britain and everywhere else. Yeah, we're going to release it everywhere, but it wasn't released there. It was released in Germany and in Canada. And at that point, I was really giving in. I said, no, I have to go back to other stuff. I mean, the music industry is not really what I want. And I was still involved with music because all my friends and my partner at those days was working in music business. So I just kept away. I got lots of requests, to sing on this album and to do this and that, and I just said, no, this is enough. I'm a creative person and I can do other stuff. So that's when I left music for ages.
Decades, actually. So it's always curious. I remember when I did, an interview with dear old Fast Eddie from Motorhead, thinking, oh, what happens after you've been in Motorhead and then suddenly it's over? What was it? How did you then navigate your, the 90s and onwards? Did you sort of go into other fields and other worlds?
At those days when we recorded Devils, I got very much interested into acid house, and I was in London at the Heaven Club, and so I saw this in a completely different scene. The acid house scene, lots of ecstasy and stuff, and factories where they have these parties. And I went back to Germany, and we had this scene too. And I started getting into techno music, which I really very much liked. It was like punk in the beginning, but completely different. It was like rhythm and bass,
yes,
and not guitars and this kind of singing that we had. Well, I went into that scene, and for various reasons, I started working as a producer for the very first techno show on German television for the German MTV, which was called VIVA TV. So I was producer and editor for this show, and that brought me back into music. But no one in the scene knew that I used to be a singer. But I did lots and lots of interviews with like all these very famous and known DJs from all over Chicago, Detroit, New York, London. And they liked to do interviews with me because I knew a lot about music, and I was not like a fan or anything. I was just asking them questions about music. So it was pretty interesting.
Yes.
And I never had the intention to tell anyone, well, I was a musician too. And no, never, never.
Yes, you could bury that one. Yeah, because I do remember, I mean, to be honest, I was that indie kid who loved Jean Peel. So he introduced us to all those things, like a guy called Gerald, 808 State, and then there was other people like Adamski, and then you had Frankie Knuckles, and that, like you mentioned, the Chicago house scene, and Detroit as well. So I sort of, being obsessed with John Peel, I sort of went along with all these kind of exciting kind of new fields. So it was kind of fresh and funky. And then you had bands who started sort of bringing in sort of dance elements as well. There was a band in this country, I think they were called Censor, who were very good. But I remember the early kind of world of... there was something called UK Fresh, 86. There was Street Sounds compilations, and then going to see people like Grandmaster Flash, and Mantronics was another, and there was other rappers like Roxy Shante and the Real Roxanne. So yes, the world of rap, and then you had that Trouble Funk and Go-Go, which I know is a band with guitars. But yeah, dance music had also become quite a passion as well at that stage. And yes, finding yourself in a field raving to sort of repetitive beats. It was definitely to do. So was techno, because Berlin's got a massive techno scene as well. Did you stay in Hamburg at this stage, or had you moved away from?
Well, I stayed in Hamburg, but I was in Berlin pretty often, especially when the wall came down. You had all these clubs there, like E-Werk and Bank and all these real techno hells, to be honest, and lots of techno DJs there, like Westbam and all these people. I was there pretty often, so I know all this.
Yes, and then so do you start sort of creating your own art a decade or two after that? Do you start sort of creating your own pieces of for painting?
I went back to art. So I had my reasons. Very few things happened in my life, and I decided to completely go out of music and go back to art. And that's where I started painting. So that was like a relief for me, completely different. I still do that these days. It's very relaxing for me to work with color and be in a completely different world, in my world.
Yes, absolutely. And had you sort of, were there any particular artist or art scenes that you'd been drawn to? Because it has, looking at it, it's got a lot of abstract qualities to it. I didn't know if you'd sort of been drawn to people like Jackson Pollock or any of those kind of artists yourself in your younger days or later days.
Yeah, I always followed art all my life, and also through my family, and the so-called the new wilds, die neuen Wilden, which were the ones in the 80s. They were like painting, as you just said, like Pollock, very wildly and very colorful, and they're completely unknown these days. Funny reason, but it's true. But yeah, I always followed music, color, and paintings. Yes, of course, I did. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And when did you start to exhibit? I know David Bowie often would talk about sort of painting, but never wanting to exhibit. But obviously, did you take that step and think, no, I want to have my work shown and seen by people?
Yeah, of course. I received a green card at some point, and I decided to go to New York and started working there. And that's when my first exhibitions happened. And then at some point, I got an invite from people in Britain, in Leeds. I exhibited there. That was organized by someone who was a huge Xmal Deutschland fan. And he used to be a hooligan and fan, followed us around at those days. And at some point, he made a lot of money. So that's how it is. And so he invited me, and it was very nice. And through this guy, I also went into another project, which was called Illa Masca, and which was like a cosmetic, a very new cosmetic collection. So I was the one to be responsible for color, and I worked in this team together with Dave Vanian from The Damned. So there was a circle again, back to music, in brackets.
Blimey, that's amazing. So just briefly, because that was quite interesting, did you say you started working in perfume as well?
It was a cosmetic, was color, like lipsticks and color for the face, and it was pretty wild. It was all based on the philosophy that we had as a band, and also like Dave Vanian, of course. This guy was also a Dave Vanian fan. That it was called like Dare to be Different, and all this gender sort of thing. And so be a man, be a woman. You need a brand to color your face, to be different. And so it was pretty exciting. I did it for a few years. I was traveling between Hamburg, London, New York, and back and forth for almost 5 years or something.
Amazing. And then when did you start to sort of get the urge to
I tell you my whole life here.
No, but I've been playing your new album, Codes, a lot, and it's amazing work and amazing sound. I mean, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, it's so, but obviously, having done the music, done your techno work, and then became, discovered, well, not discovered, but sort of embraced art and came into another world, and then suddenly, not suddenly, it might not have been sudden at all, but when did sort of the urge to create a new album appear?
Well, first of all, I was successful as being a painter, and of course, always people came up to me if I would sing something and be part of blah, 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 blah. I always said, no, I stopped singing. And I have this very old, in brackets, a friend, Mona Mur, who I worked on this album with. She is a friend from the 80s. And we always, had times where we spent time together, and she lived in Berlin, and she was always, for like ages, I think maybe 10, 12 years, she started saying, you should really start singing again. And I said, no, I don't want to sing. And she said, yeah, but why don't you give it a try? And so I was just thinking about it, and but I said, no. When COVID came up, I got this mail from a guy from Tel Aviv, Yishai, asking the same thing. Would you be interested in singing a song? I said, no, I don't sing anymore, but we had COVID. And I couldn't paint, I couldn't go to my gym, I was forced to stay at home. And so I told my friend Mona, this guy came up and singing a song. Blah, blah. And so she said, why don't you ask him to send it, the basic track? And I called him and say, yeah, just send me the basic track. The track is Skugornas, and it was written, the basic track was written by a guy, a doom metal guy from Norway. And so these people said, you can sing whatever you want. We send you the basic track and you can just listen to it. I said, okay. And I listened to it while standing in my kitchen very early morning. And I sang these words in there, which I just came up with. And I sent them over to my friend Mona, and she said, this is amazing. How did you do this? I said, I was standing in my kitchen and singing the song. I made these words up and just listened to it. And she said, this is amazing. You know what? Why don't you come over to Berlin and we give it a try? You sing it again in the studio, because she has a studio. And if you don't like it, we just throw it out and, just give it a try. And we did. And it worked. And I started talking to Yishai about his family and where he comes from originally. And so he was telling me his story about his grandfather, who was a partisan in now the so-called Ukraine, which used to be Poland and Russia at those days, in the early days. Yeah? You want to ask me something?
No. I was thinking.
Go ahead. Okay.
No. Because just on that front with Mona, she has her own studio, doesn't she? And she does a lot of kind of music and soundtracks for sort of games, doesn't she? I remember, because I did an interview with her, and she sort of explained her early life, which is also she's got a connection to Poland as well, hasn't she?
Yes, family roots up in Poland. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and then then what's the next process with that?
Yeah, well, I talked to Yishai, and he was telling me about his grandfather, that he was like a partisan, and he joined the Bielski brothers. They were like, there's a film about these guys. Daniel Craig is playing one of those partisans. Quite bad guys, but they were around in the woods. And so the whole story, what he told me, it was very, very interesting. And at those days here in Germany, the German government gave money to artists to record records because there was nothing going on. And so I said to Mona, the story is really, really interesting about his grandfather. Ask him to send some files, and he sent some spoken words from the bunker in Tel Aviv because they got bombed at those days. That was like at the end of the Corona days, I think. And I said to Mona, you know what, we should do something with this. Maybe poetry, or maybe just give it a bit of music or anything. And at some point, I said to her, you know what, we should write an album out of this, because the woods and how you survive and what happens to you when you lose your family, what happens when you leave your house. There's nothing there, just woods and trees and no food and nothing. What does it do to you, to your emotions? What the whole process of being on your own, alone. So I started writing my words and used some of his words and wrote music with Mona and went to Berlin like every month. And we started writing, and we got this support from the government. And and then we had this album.
And then the album, that is amazing. Yeah, so it's kind of, was it having that basis or that kind of, you're not having to sort of sit there and write 10 songs about how you're feeling, but having that sort of, not push, but some direction from that other source. Did that make the project become much more interesting and curious that you hadn't thought about before, having not sort of done any solo albums? Because it did sound, because listening to the album, it does have quite a lot of different emotions of fear, violence, strangeness, loneliness, but it's quite, at times it's quite abstract musically and sonically. It's quite varied in different places, and it's not just I found it kind of fascinating just listening to it as a piece of music, because it's got a very structure to its running order. So I just wondered if having that catalyst was the kind of reason for the album sort of coming together so smoothly.
It was a completely different way of working on this album, because I was free, completely free. Mona said, you can do what you want. I support you on this. But then, of course, she gave me some help on everything, and she is technically absolutely perfect. I'm not. I can hear. I hear melodies, I hear words, I know how to build up emotions and stuff. But I was not, let's say, like, let's go back to Devils, for example, this ongoing control of me as an artist it doesn't work with me. So here I was completely free, and it was very emotional to get this all out. For example, this track Exit, I sang that once. That was it. I sang it once, and I did not put anything on it. I mean, not like, oh, you have to do this line again and this line again. I just stood there and sang it. It's so deep for me emotionally. And Mona turned around and said to me, where is this from? And it's me, So I was completely free and working. And the funny thing also is I was, even now, because I go into rehearsals, I always thought, oh God, singing live. But you know what? My voice is stronger than before. It's funny, but it's maybe because I'm completely, there is no pressure. There is no, you have to do this, you have to do that. This is just me, myself, and I doing this.
Amazing. It is amazing. Probably one of my standout tracks on the album, which I'm not going to be able to pronounce at all, so I'll be horrendous, but it begins with a Z. Is it Wissench what?
Zwischenwelt.
Yes.
Between words. Mm-hmm.
Right. That is probably one of my favourite songs on the album. I just think it's it's a beautiful one. Can you remember how that one came together and the process for that?
Yeah, it's Olaf who, Manuela played most of the guitars on the album, and I have to say, before we started saying this could be an album, I said, but if we go and work on a kind of album, I want Manuela to be part of it, because she is very important to me. She is an influence. The way she plays is very quirky sometimes and very different. She's pretty lazy in everything she does, but when you come to music, she is really, amazing. So We worked on a few tracks, but a few years before, she worked with a guy called Olaf. He is a guitarist and bass player, and they wrote many, 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 many songs together. And I always said to Mona, I want a slow song. And I listened to these demos they did at some point, and this song was written basic song again, by Olaf, who now plays guitar and bass when we play live. And so he came up with this song, and he didn't have any vocals on there, and it's pretty strange, written pretty strange. The whole way how it moves, it is very touching. And so we took this song in. So it's basically his song. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And did you find, because of the material that you've written, were you able to inhabit this story of being, in the woods and sort of surviving and the sense of sort of alienation or loneliness? Was that something that you could sort of possess and sort of relate to at times?
Yeah, it was. I could totally feel it. And the funny thing was, even, when we started working on it, we had this stuff in the Ukraine happening. And that was exactly where it all happened with his grandfather, so it was so intense to have the story and then the war in Ukraine and what came up there, all the stories that came up. So I said to him, I can't believe it. I mean, now this happens in the Ukraine, and we're writing this song about, death and being on your own and living with a war in a way. So, but for some reason, I wouldn't say, I mean, I enjoy my life and I'm very happy and I always make jokes and stuff. But then again, there is a different side in me, which maybe through things that you lived through or something, it was just there and it had to get out. And so that happened when we wrote this album. So I don't know. This is the only thing that I can say.
Yes. Is it
I think people can feel that. So because many people say it's so intense, there must be a reason for that. Maybe that's something what it is. Emotions.
Well, absolutely. It's fantastic, actually, at the moment, because there's been a couple of, I don't know if you listened to the latest album by The Cure, but I found that Robert Smith's really captured something. And in a way, this album also has kind of captured something that's, quite a lot of levels and emotions that kind of works as a complete piece rather than just picking out individual songs. So I think, as a sort of a piece of music, it's kind of interesting because it's quite a lot of variety. There's some melancholic moments. There's some sort of quite hard rhythmic moments. There's kind of great, haunting moments. It's a very dramatic piece. And I can imagine you must feel like this is probably one of the proudest albums you've ever worked on and produced.
Yeah, I think you will always kind of say that when you do something new, but I think it is. I can see that also because the reaction, like from all over, is pretty amazing. I did not expect this. Others did. I did not, because I don't go for projects because I want to be successful or anything. I just go because I have to do it. It's like in me. I just have to get it out in a way. And for some reason, it was the right time to do this. As I said, without any pressure and stuff. And I think, as you just mentioned, the Cure album, many people I wouldn't say compare it, but they say it's a kind of very similar way of getting things across or something. I don't want to compare this with The Cure, but I can see the point. I mean, what he did there is really intense too, and that's why people like it.
Yes.
It is real.
It's quite a journey when you listen to those albums, and the same with Black Star with David Bowie. Actually, it's quite a journey as well, which is, it's quite hard work on that one for various reasons, being a Bowie fan. But yes, so you've got a live date, haven't you, and some possibly more live dates. Have you? Are you looking forward to those? Getting out there on stage?
It is not easy to bring it all together because the album is pretty well produced. A lot of electronics, which I like on one hand, but I'm not a technical person. So there's Mona and there's Christian who's doing all the drums and stuff. Yes, I'm looking forward to it, but there are more and more people turning up from all over saying, "Oh, I'm there too." Oh God, oh God. Yeah, well, I'm doing a bit with John Robb, Grauzone evening, the very first one. Then I show a painting too at the gallery, and we play on Saturday and Sunday we go to Paris. We play in Paris and. There are more and more dates coming in, and also Britain, as it looks like. But we still work on it. And, well, it's kind of all over. But we have to see how it works and how it gets together. It's nice people I work with. Let's see what. We have to do this first, and we go from there. We have visuals, which a friend of mine did also with my work, very sparse stuff. So, well, let's see. I mean, I can't say I'm looking forward. I do in a way, but I'm very surprised how many people turn up and say things like "we come to" and "we are very much looking forward." And it is. In general, I would say it is a lot of pressure, but I'm a professional, so just wish it away and just go and do it. So
yes, and it's sometimes quite nice to see how one reacts to a situation that you think, this is it's almost looking at yourself as a third person, thinking, oh, this is interesting. This is, slightly out of my comfort zone, but at the same time, it can be quite an interesting challenge. And ho, it's going to be lovely. And with your set, are you concentrating obviously on the album? Are you sort of playing songs from your past as well at this stage?
Yeah, we decided so. I mean, of course, as everyone says, oh, a solo project. Okay. Who needs a solo project? But anyway, so yes, we play songs from the very first albums, like from Fetish and from Toxin. Yes, we do. But we did a bit of a rebuild of these songs, but it's really nice. I enjoy it. I thought it was not an easy idea to do so, but then again, I mean, people expect you to do something like that, and I think it will be nice. Yeah.
Yes. That is well. Look, thank you ever so much for your time. Sorry about that.
It's okay. You haven't seen me, so next time.
I haven't seen you, which is great. But yes, this is great. But thanks for your patience. It's always can get a little bit sort of tense. But yes, I'm really excited by this, and hopefully, yes, you do have some London dates and or dates in the UK, and get a chance to see you there, which will be incredible.
Yeah. You're very welcome. I mean, we do play. I don't know. Yeah, London. I think Brighton, and by the way, we played in Norwich once on the very first tour we did. We played in Norwich, and I bought a little silver ring there, so I still have it.
Do you?
You are from Norwich, right?
Yes. God, can you remember where you bought it from?
At a bed and breakfast. It was like an old lady having this bed and breakfast, like a huge house, and we stayed there. And so she sold silvery stuff, and so I bought a tiny silver ring from Norwich. So I still have it.
That is such a nice little number. Oh wow, that's brilliant. Well, there you go. I know, and on that bombshell, it's a lovely story. That is nearly the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Anja Huwe for giving me the time for that. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.